My name is Lex, and this week on Spidey Signals, me and my co-host Alex discuss Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's Master Planner Saga, the social mores of 60s Marvel, and Hot Dr. Pepper. Get ready to face your destiny, because it's time for Spidey Signals. Welcome back to Spidey Signals, the podcast where two guys with the same name talk about Spider-Man. I'm Lex.
And I'm Alex.
Last week, we were joined by a friend of the show, Sir B, and we talked about Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. That's my general reaction to it.
That what you heard from me was mine, which was with pained silence.
I'm laughing like a person in a straitjacket would. Like,
I'm glad I never have to think about Turn Off the Dark ever again outside of whatever ranking we do at the end of this, if that's even a fucking thing we do this season.
I don't know. We haven't been ranking the non-movie things, so
yeah, who gives a shit? I'm glad I never have to think about it again.
Exactly. And, you know, I always say that I love doing the guest episodes because I love having other people on. But, you know, that episode was a fucking nightmare. And, you know, thank God we had somebody else to share that. We always have to call in backup when we do the worst shit. Like we had Phoenix on when we did the Amazing Spider-Man 2 because that was just so bad.
Oh, God,
we had to call in backup.
That was great.
Sometimes you need a third person to bring you out of the depths of hell. But this week we're talking about something that's actually good.
Yeah, real good.
Yeah. We're talking about the Master Planner Saga. This is actually probably going to be a pretty short episode because we're only reading 3 comic books. Relatively, yeah. These comic books are Amazing Spider-Man 31, 32, and 33, which were released from September 9th to November 11th of 1965. So they're the oldest thing we've talked about on the podcast either season. Mm-hmm. This is really early stuff. The dates on the actual comic, like the cover dates say like they came out in like 1966. Some of them did, but they were the actual date they were published were September 9th through November 11th of 1965. We also don't have any information on who did the coloring for this. I want to assume Steve Ditko did, but I don't know for certain. All we have is script and plot and artwork and the lettering. And speaking of that, the script and the editing was done by Stan Lee. The plot and the artwork was done by Steve Ditko. And the lettering was done by Sam Rosen and Artie Simic. Obviously, there's no real need to introduce any of these guys. You know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
This is toward the end of the lead Ditko run. I believe it ends around issue 38. And there's a whole lot of behind the scenes stuff that we'll probably talk about in the fun facts section about the making of these 3 issues and how things were pretty tenuous between Stan and Steve at this point. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting story. But Alex, do you have any personal experiences with the Master Planner Saga?
Not predominantly. I've reread a lot of, read for the first time when I was younger. I had a couple of compendiums that collected some Lee Ditko run stuff, but I don't recall where it ended. It didn't get terribly far in, and I never actually finished it. So if I did read this, I certainly didn't remember it. So this was another fresh comic experience for me.
Yeah, I also had sort of similar issues of Lee Ditko, which I think ended around the time of, I want to say like the first either the first Enforcers issue or like the second Dr. Octopus appearance. But it wasn't until years later that I ended up, getting full-on compendiums and reading through everything. But I remember specifically when I was a little kid, I had a book called I think something like Stan Lee's Ultimate Marvel Universe or something. It was one of those books that had a little audio module on the side where there were little audio clips from Stan that you could listen to. I've talked about this book on the podcast before.
We should do an
I love
episode
that.
on
It's really sure, why not? A lot of it has nothing to do with Spider-Man, but it's a really, really good book. And it's just Stan Lee sort of looking back on his career in Marvel, from like, his first stuff that he wrote for Captain America all the way up to the very late stuff that he worked on like with like Silver Surfer in the 80s. But it's a really good book, and they specifically there's a large sequence where he talks about this issue, specifically 33, because it's the main one that everyone remembers, which has the art for our episode, which I think I did a really good job on that art. I really like the way it came out.
Mhm.
But I remember hearing about it a lot. It's obviously been recreated so many times in the adaptations we've talked about, in Homecoming, in Spectacular, partially in the Marvel PS4 video game. It's just a really iconic comic. And, you go back and read it, and it's really good.
I can't speak highly enough about it. Yeah, we're gonna get into it, but this is quality stuff.
It is. So, yeah, Alex, you want to just start taking us through the plot here?
Absolutely, right away. As we said, this is issues 31, 32, and 33 of the original Amazing Spider-Man run, and we're just going to get right into the first one, issue 31, which begins in the dead of night with a small
Which
task
this
force.
this,
Oh, go
this
ahead,
issue
go
has
ahead.
a great title. All of them do. This one's called "If This Be My Destiny."
Hmm. Which I think a lot of people also interchangeably call the Master Planner Saga by that name too, just because it was the name of the first issue.
I've heard it called a lot of different things. Generally, it's either "If This Be My Destiny," which I think it's called on Wikipedia, or I've heard it as the Master Planner Saga, and that's why I called it that.
Hmm.
Uh,
I've heard it uses that more.
the final chapter, because that's the last one. It's a lot of different things, but anyway, yeah.
Spider-Man takes Manhattan. A small task force of purple-clad men is the best way to describe them.
The Purple
They were some.
Goons.
They were some. Yeah, they're either goons or thugs for my entire script that I wrote here.
I literally just have they're called the Purple Goons in my notes.
They're very their armor's kind of bug-like, I guess. These Master Planner goons. It's not a terribly memorable or ground-breaking or like crazy cool new design. They're pretty. I don't know.
They're
They're
like they're
goons.
like frogmen, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much.
Frogmen suits from World War II.
Sometimes they have air hoses if they're underwater. They're like GI Joes or something. They're
Yeah,
Cobra villains, but yeah, they're very just foot soldier kind of guys.
but they're Marvel.
Uh,
It's a Marvel comic from the '60s, so they're purple.
yeah, glaringly purple, and there's always like a million of them. They descend from a helicopter, like a mustard yellow helicopter, onto a plant that produces atomic devices, talking excitedly about how they're going to keep to their strict timetable. That's the thing they keep talking about the entire time they do their heists. By the way, is how like punctual they are.
How
Uh,
punctual they are, and how cool the Master Planner is. Like, he's so smart.
Everything will go according to the master planner's plan. He's so fucking cool.
Except for the
Um,
one thing that could reasonably happen, which is Spider-Man showing up.
which happens just about every time. They locate the device they came for, some atomic device, because this is a '60s comic, so you're going to hear a lot about atomic stuff and radiation played
Oh
very
yeah.
fast and loose. And they note that they have 30 seconds to spare. They've operated so efficiently. A guard rounds the corner, gun drawn, ready to investigate all this, but they make him sleep with a gas gun. Uh,
Silly.
that's a classic Spider-Man gas gun for you.
Gotta have it.
On the move to escape, Spider-Man springs up in here to board their helicopter, because that's immediately what you do. Spider-Man perceives these guys as must having some kind of like big-time connection because they have their own personal escape chopper, and he clambers into it, and they immediately, the Purple Goons, bombard him with sleeping gas, which kind of makes him woozy and disoriented, and really affects his reaction time for the rest of this fight. Uh, the goons employ Plan G, which I have to hope stands for goon, which is to attach signaling devices to their score and pitch it overboard into the bay.
I like that they have a plan G. I like to imagine that they have A through F, but they ran out of them. Like they just keep having to come up with new plans.
Plan G was really dependent on Spider-Man boarding the helicopter. Not Spider-Man confronting them at the dock, or it's Plan G. It's a little ways down the list. But yeah, Plan G is just to attach signaling devices and pitch it overboard. So a second task force of frogmen with air hoses and flippers with their accessory pack can be dispatched to recover the unit exactly where described. Aboard the chopper, Spider-Man whips a chunk of metal with his webbing into the rotors of the helicopter and makes the chopper plummet, but he uses his spider agility to get away. This is one of those. Another thing I love about this era of comics is like a lot of times there'll be thought bubbles when he's fighting or doing an action, but then there'll be times where he just says to himself out loud for no reason, "Thank you, spider agility."
Yeah,
Like,
that's a really common thing that Stan does a lot in the early run where Peter talks to himself a lot. Like not even like thought bubbles, he talks to himself and he's like, "I love having these spider powers."
I guess that
Like
tracks with shit like I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye. Like, who's he talking to?
I guess it kind of makes a little more sense here because this is a comic book that presumably some kid in the 60s would pick up, and you had to introduce the idea of the character without any prior knowledge. But there's something very quaint about these issues with how good they are. It's primitive early Spider-Man.
Very, very primitive, but still rudimentary enough. Like we're talking about fucking caveman art here or something. It's good.
It's like fire. It's one of the first inventions, but it's a very good one.
There we go.
Or like the wheel.
The big wheel, if you will.
This is the big wheel of Spider-Man stories.
So, having just taken a helicopter down into the bay, into the water, Spider-Man shows immediate concern for the human beings he just put in danger, and goes to rescue them from drowning, but the crew has vanished. Elsewhere, the master planner tells himself to be more careful in the future, not anticipating Spider-Man's intervention in this particular matter. We get our first little monologue of just text bubbles over his secret underwater lair, I think, here.
As we talked about back in the Clone Saga episode when we talked about that, I think the first Clone Saga story, which was back in the 70s. Early Marvel comics are just super wordy. Like there's you can just turn to like any random page and it's just like there's the blocks and blocks of text to read.
Yeah.
Which is there's so much, and it's all in Stan's purple prose, so it's all like very intricate and flowery, and it's like, oh my god, at some points, but there's still
3.
The pacing is snappy enough that it works.
For sure, and it all ties back to that quaintness we talked about. It's very much a comic from a different era. We go from that little monologue to Peter rushing away from home for his day of registration on the campus of Empire State University. And after he's left the home for the day, May kind of oohs a little bit. She's hiding an illness from him. Uh-oh.
May, who looks like the face on the front of the Necronomicon in The Evil Dead.
She just kind of always looks like beef jerky, yeah.
She does. Like the way that Steve Ditko draws Aunt May in all of the early Marvel comics is so funny. Like she has like essentially a banana head, like her head is curved. Like it's curved and it looks like a piece of worn leather.
Yeah, for reference, this is the character Marissa Tomei now plays.
Things have changed a lot.
World's changing, boys.
World's changing, boys. Time we change too. It's just I love, especially right at the very end of issue 33 when it's May laying in her hospital bed. She just has this banana leather face. It's so fucking stupid.
She's like completely white, like an albino banana.
Exactly.
We get a fun little splash page montage of Peter's day of registration. All the rigorous shit he has to go through with bureaucracy and textbooks, and it is a little PTSD inducing. I remember that for me, and it's it hits different as a grown up, I guess. But it's a fun little sequence.
Yeah.
He still has his first day of classes on the horizon, and that night Aunt May faints in mid-conversation with Peter. Peter makes a house call to a doctor, which is a thing you could do in 1965. And the doctor says that May is incredibly weak and needs to go to the hospital for tests. That old comic book, getting tests at the hospital, gotta love it.
Exactly. You gotta keep them in suspense.
I'll talk about this more in the trivia, but goddamn, does May spend a lot of time in the hospital?
Yeah, May is fucking out for the count. I think I don't remember. I think it was on a podcast one time that I heard talking about these early Lee Ditko issues. I want to say I think that the idea of Aunt May and Uncle Ben, I think they originally wanted them to be Peter's grandparents, but like
that would make a lot more sense.
There was some kind of internal mix-up at Marvel or something, but for some reason they got changed to his aunt and uncle, so he just has a fucking ancient elderly aunt and uncle for no reason.
Well, he only has the elderly aunt now.
Well, he only has the elderly aunt now because he fucked up, but he's working on that. He's atoning for that in his own humorous way.
Especially here. Peter heads home for a sleepless night of stress after May's condition stabilizes with medicine and rest, and he ruminates on how he feels like he's been taking May for granted, especially, recently, now that his attention has been really diverted by being Spider-Man. We go from there, after he has that horrible, restless, no-sleep night, to his first day of college classes. Spider-Man in college, whoever thought we'd get here.
Spider-Man in college, and it's when Peter is in college that you really realize that this comic was written by a middle-aged man.
He's a hip cat, man. What are you talking about?
It's one of the best parts about reading the old Lee Ditko run is just reading Stan Lee try to figure out how teenagers in the 60s worked. He's like, what would they say? They when he gets bullied in high school, like the two big insults are milksop and panty waist. Like that'll really get him.
Milk, my god. And there is a lot of that here
and
too.
Panty waist.
Later, Gwen, who we'll talk about soon, makes reference to like Peter not giving her a tumble later, and I read that and I was like, what?
I'm just imagining Stan Lee in a trench coat and a fedora walking around college campuses, like trying to get the scoop.
Hello, fellas. What's hip? What's happening?
What's happening, cat?
What would you call a foppish lad these days?
What would you call some kind of panty waist fellow? A milksop? And like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Peter is having a very sulky, sleepy time on the campus, and Flash Thompson is excitedly meeting Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy, who are also in college. This is the introductory issue for both of these characters.
They're joined first appearance.
Mm-hmm.
They just kind of drop them in here. There's no fanciful. They don't get an MJ like super crazy introduction. They're just like, hey, they're here.
Design-wise, Harry looks exactly like he always looks. Gwen's a little off-model in her first appearance, I'll say.
Yeah, Gwen is I guess she's a little more Marilyn Monroe-y, I want to say.
She's more lithe, and she's got like way more angular features than we're used to, and her hair's a lot different. But, it's the 60s, shit evolves.
I don't remember... so I don't know this for certain. It's been a while since I've reread through all the Lee Ditko runs. I don't think they've actually shown Norman Osborn yet.
No.
Okay, so I'm right. They haven't shown Norman Osborn yet. And before they show Norman Osborn, they don't even reveal who the Green Goblin is. And even in the Green Goblin's very first appearance, where he flies on a broomstick, and Spider-Man fights him in the desert, which is a real thing.
That happened in the Bible too.
Yeah, just like Jesus fought the Green Goblin in the desert. He wandered the desert.
Played by Willem Dafoe.
Both of them played by Willem Dafoe versus Willem Dafoe. Yes, Willem Defrender versus Willem Defrender versus Willem Dafoe. But they've deliberately, Stan and Steve deliberately kept the Green Goblin's secret identity a secret. And they don't reveal who Norman... So, like, they made Harry Osborn first, and then they made Norman after that, which is very strange and funny. And they're like, what should he look like? Exactly like Harry. Just make him look exactly like Harry.
It's great. It's great. I'm glad Peter didn't get like genetically whatever makes May's side of the family age, like tree bark, if that's how comic book genetics work.
Yeah, May looks like a ghoul from Fallout.
What are you looking at, Peter?
She looks like Harold from Fallout 3 when he's merged with the tree.
Oh, poor Aunt May.
Poor Aunt May.
Peter makes his appearance in front of this trio of people we've just talked about, and he does not react or hear Flash calling him like at all. Flash is, "Hey, Peter, let me come over here so I can make fun of you and introduce you to rich people and pretty people, numbskull." But he just keeps walking, preoccupied with his Aunt May worries, his perennial Aunt May worries.
Yeah.
Harry kind of finds Peter stuck up and like, who would want to be friends with that jackass? But Gwen is like, oh, there's something going on here. My Gwen sense is tingling.
This thing where Peter brushes them off. It begins an odd trend in this storyline where any kind of just vague, like, obviously Peter is like doing something. Nobody. What I'm trying to say is nobody in these comics gives anybody the benefit of the doubt. Everyone immediately assumes that just because he brushed him off one time, Peter is a massive asshole and he has a big ego or whatever. Nobody. The 60s Marvel's like social mores where like do not dare to ignore someone or else you're the worst person ever. It's like ruthless society.
Well, like Electro and Amazing 2. Don't forget
Exactly.
someone's name. It's very rude.
Don't forget someone's name. Except he didn't get mad about that part. He got mad that all the TV screens turned to Spider-Man instead of him. That's somehow even stupider than the forgetting the name thing.
Love it.
Aren't you ready for him to be in a good movie? Aren't you excited for that?
Yes, I really am. I'm sure we're going to talk
Jamie
about this
Foxx to
throughout
be a
the
good
episode.
Electro.
But we are at this point, Lex and I both sitting at less than 24 hours until we are seeing No Way Home in a movie theater.
Yes, we're recording this on Wednesday. We're seeing it on Thursday, and the episode is coming out on Friday. This episode, but you'll have to wait till Christmas Eve before you get your No Way Home episode, so you have time to watch it. But there will be lots of spoilers in that. Exactly. Anyway, what were we talking about?
Some kind of Spider-Man or something.
Some kind of comic book.
Between classes, Peter's preoccupation leads him to miss more greetings from potential new friends, and he calls the hospital who has no new updates for him regarding May. So, with all that in mind, he decides he's going to try to get some studying in, but he still cannot focus at all with May on his mind. Later in the cab, headed by Professor Warren, also in his introductory issue here, I imagine comic collector nerds probably value this one a lot for everything that it's, about here.
Yeah, obviously, like, this is one of the most valuable Lee Ditko sets along with, like, the first ones.
Oh, yeah.
Any kind of first appearance, people like that shit.
And this is like a triple first appearance and the first issue of an iconic arc. This is probably worth its weight in gold or more. Much more, actually. Comics are light. What the fuck? Harry formulates a plan to prank the Swellhead Peter. That's another thing I noted. Swellhead, hyphenated.
Swellhead, yeah.
Gwen is a little reluctant about this because she is in college and doesn't want to prank people. Again, talking about how I've been watching all the Spider-Man movies again in anticipation of No Way Home. And we were just talking the other night, me and my partners, about how, like, what the fuck? Why is Peter getting bullied in college? Why doesn't he turn around as a grown man and say, hey, what the fuck, man? I pay tuition here. You got a problem? Do you have a problem right now?
I literally wrote a note here for this first issue. We talked about this all the way back in our Spider-Man 3 episode, but who pranks other students in college? Who does that?
I do not get it, but
like I've seen maybe dorm room pranks, but not like pranks in class. Like,
I know,
who does
right?
that?
Especially regarding fucking vials of chemicals that explode, but whatever. Who gives a shit? Harry
I mean, chemistry class in college, it's mostly just people trying not to fall asleep.
Especially Peter right now. But yeah, Gwen is reluctant to prank because, of course, she would be. But her role in this is to distract Peter, so they can pull the prank. So she has to borrow a pen, but of course, Peter is out to lunch mentally. He can't divert any attention. So she storms off icily, humph kind of stuff.
Yeah, as soon as Peter, like, they don't even think of, like, oh, maybe Peter's thinking about something else, or, I mean, and even Flash knows that Pete has an old ass aunt that he has to take care of. So it's like he doesn't even think about that, and like maybe he's busy with something, I don't know, just give him the benefit of the doubt. But then they're just like, Peter Parker is a fucking asshole, and we hate him so much.
He's a dork. Harry has switched out Peter's chemicals that he works with.
All his chemicals.
So when Peter goes to mix them, they create a little mini explosion, and Professor Warren does not react well to this at all and chews Peter out in front of everybody because he thought he did it on purpose or something. And
why would you assume that? Again, nobody gives anybody the benefit of the doubt in these comics. Everyone immediately assumes the worst. It's like, you fucking idiot, you asshole.
Gwen feels like immediate remorse for this. But Harry says, "Oh, it's fine. We'll invite him for a Coke after class."
Get him a ice cream float.
God. Peter
not into the soda shop while we listen to President Hoover on the radio.
It'll be a real sock hop.
Exactly.
Peter kind of rushes off in refusal before they can even fully invite him for the aforementioned Coke after class. So they take Flash instead.
And Gwen, like, throughout this, she has like a vague. She's like, "I'm so attracted to him," and it's like, "Yep, middle-aged man writing."
That weird mute dork who's like a school shooter type. That's all I know about him so far. He's really hot. Peter lies to Aunt May in the hospital, claiming to have made some swell new friends when she presses him about his first day.
Oh, it's so swell.
A real swell head. As visiting hours end, Peter is told that his aunt's condition is really bad. She needs to remain for more of those tests with a capital T. And Peter just kind of slinks away. That's, kind of a thing that happens a lot in this comic. That's the they fight of this comic. Is Peter leaving the hospital and going, oh.
When does he have like his late night study session? Is that now or is it later?
It's pretty shortly, I think.
Okay.
I know he was like I know he did like a really restless first night before classes, but I think the long night hasn't happened yet, I think.
All right.
Checking the mail, it's nothing but bills, which with the upcoming, Aunt May and the little trouble coming finally, it's just, more perennial Parker Luck, no money stuff. He decides, what's going to help out here is some pictures of Spider-Man to lighten the load. But when he goes out to, fight crime, the city is completely quiet, and there's fucking nothing happening. There's no action to get shots of in New York City.
In Marvel New York City, where there's all kinds of weird shit going on.
Absolutely. He's the only weirdo out in town at this point, and nothing is happening.
Issue 2 of the Amazing Spider-Man, there were fucking space aliens and like Soviet nuclear missile subs, but there's nothing here today.
No action at all in New York City, and dawn creeps over the city. It's been one complete night of no crime. It's been, one day of foolishness and no foolishness in the workplace here for Peter.
And Peter goes home to study and try to study for class. Like, who studies for class on the second or third day of school?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're still getting orientation done. Oh my god, I gotta make sure I click I notify the syllabus on the website. I gotta make sure I do it. But yeah, he's like draped. Canvas. He's like draped over his studies like a character in a fucking Percy Shelley novel, and it's like he's dramatically lit by the sunrise.
Yeah, it's like lit like Dick Tracy.
It's a really good image, but it's like super like over dramatic. It's really funny.
Yeah, it's a little over the top, but it's Spider-Man for you. They describe him as bone weary in like either a text bubble or narration or something like on the next.
This motherfucker is tired.
He's trudging towards day 2, and onlookers are chiding him for his supposedly like haughty and oh, I'm better than you ways. We won't talk to anybody, boo hoo. But somehow
That's
Gwen,
such a cruel society these people live in.
I know, right? What the fuck, 1965? Gwen still thinks no, he's handsome, so he must be nice deep down. Uh,
Only
meanwhile,
ugly people can be mean.
J. Jonah Jameson is yelling at Foswell to bring
Oh
him
my
a
god.
story ASAP.
Not just J. Jonah Jameson. They call him in the caption box that introduces him. They call him the Demon Newspaper Man, J.
Yes, they
Jonah
do.
Jameson,
Yes, they
like the
do.
emissary from hell, J. Jonah Jameson.
That's what they'll call him in No Way Home, maybe.
Oh my god! If they call him the emissary of hell, I'm gonna cream my jeans.
He's Foswell has to get a story ASAP, and they need to cover the robberies of science equipment that have been happening all over town. You know, science equipment.
Classic
Uh,
science equipment robberies.
Boswell decides that Patch should take a look at this,
Good old
you know,
Patch.
because they're tight, Foswell and Patch. Uh, JJ yells at Betty Brant to get a hold of Peter, who he can't reach at his home for some weird reason, and all of a sudden Ned Leeds shows up. With a desire to know what the answer to Betty's question is. And when I wrote this down at first, it was I assume the question is, "Will you go out with me?" But as the issues go on, apparently it's her hand in marriage.
Yes, Ned showed up earlier in the Lee Ditko run. So if you don't know, if you haven't read them yet, you need to, number one, read the Lee
Yeah,
Ditko run. It's really good.
a full read
It's
would be
it's
great one of these days.
it's so great that everything the Lee Ditko run is so good because everything Spider-Man is essentially fully formed by the time it's done. They don't make a lot of changes from how he is in that run. Like he comes out fully formed. But earlier in that comic, there's this whole big drama where Betty's brother was a gambler who
That part
worked.
I know. Yeah,
Betty's brother was
villain.
a gambling addict who got some bad debts and had to go do some kind of, I think he had to either help Doc Ock with some kind of crime. He was like forced into it by the mob or whoever he owed money to, or he was like helping him break out of prison or something like that. But anyway, he ended up dying, and Betty blames Spider-Man for it. And at this time, Betty and Peter are dating. So Peter is also trying to break things off with Betty, and his solution to that is just be an asshole to her. Uh, Great job, Peter. And at the same time, Ned Leeds shows up around this time and is like, "Hey, Betty, why don't you marry me?" And so Peter sort of sees Ned as like his way out of having to deal with Betty anymore. It's very complicated and very soap opera-y, and obviously if you remember that Stan Lee and Marvel Comics in general, used to write a lot of teen romance books back before they got into the superhero business. So it makes a lot of sense
Mhm.
that there's still a bit of that DNA left in here.
Yep. What else can you say? Um, Betty won't commit to this dedication that is bringing to the table until she can at least talk to Peter about like the status of things, because he's been dodging her left and right. Post bugle scene, Patch is at his usual hangout in the underworld, just hanging out, listening to crime talk because that's what he does.
Just walking around.
And he overhears of nuclear devices being loaded tonight at Pier 6. Good old nuclear devices.
All these villains love their fucking nuclear devices.
Nuclear vessels. Patch trails this lead out of the bar, trying to tail him for information, but loses him around a corner. And he has no evidence to take to the police, so he he's got not a lot of options for people he can go to or talk to about this. Meanwhile, back at Empire State University, Peter is once again rushing off towards May, and Gwen attempts to stop him and make conversation. But once again, he's like, yeah, bimbo, I gotta get going, and leaves her like super confused. I think that she's like, no man has ever tried to give me a tumble before or something, and I'm, way to go. Back at the hospital, the tests aren't complete, the results aren't back yet, And with not really anything else to do around there, since he can't be with May all the time, Peter departs, deciding to swing through the streets, again searching for a good photo to take. Spider-Man sees a light in an alley as if someone is trying to signal him, which I thought was weird writing. He's like, someone must be trying to signal me. And it's like, is that the case? It just kind of looks like a light to me. Oh, well. It's good old Patch who informs Spider-Man about his Pier 6 plot. You know, he can't go to the cops about it, doesn't have any proof. Maybe Spider-Man can help out. This is nuclear devices we're talking about. Spider-Man heads off to stop this with Patch behind, like, you know, left behind, clamoring for credit if Spider-Man is successful for a scoop. And over at Pier 6, more purple goons are using suction cups to clamber up the ship. Because, again, comic book. Discussing the instructions given to them by the Master Planner.
Master Planner, whose plans are masterful, and there's a line that he says earlier. I think like when Peter first fights the purple goons and beats the fuck out of them and stops their crime or whatever. The Master Planner is like in his underwater super base, and he's like, "I didn't expect to contend with Spider-Man," and it's like, what did you think? Especially when it's revealed who the Master Planner is at the beginning of the very next issue, where it's like you really didn't think Spider-Man was going to do anything about this.
I thought he moved. I don't know. He's in New York. People
I
don't
thought he
stay
went to
here
Jersey.
very
I mean, fuck, I don't know.
long. Spider-Man arrives on the scene after the goons have gassed the crew with their sleeve guns, and they attempt to spray him with a more concentrated gas than they used last time, which Peter says, or rather thinks, I guess, Thought Bubble, that he's prepared for. A goon swings a cargo boom trying to knock Spider-Man overboard, but he ends up using the cargo boom to do the same to a bunch of goons. He then shoots a bunch of webs on the cargo, trying to make it unstealable, but the goons attempt to drop a cargo net on him from a crane to, I guess, drown him, and he's able to get the net off before he even hits the water. The goons start diving away, once again, you know, air hoses in tow, and Peter realizes he can't go after them, considering they're far better equipped for that kind of escape. But he sees the cops nearby conversing with Patch. He laments that he's not getting any pictures of the action tonight again, and that's when we get the reveal that he was wearing a dry chemical filter respirator type thing under his mask. You know, good old spider science in action. It's a fun moment. I like that. In his underwater lair, the Master Planner laments via text again that Spider-Man cost him time he needs for his experiments and a ray. You know, a ray.
He needs time for his radiation experiments, you know, with radiation.
The lab tests for Aunt May, meanwhile, show that she is not meant to live much longer, and the tests are ordered again for posterity, closing out the first issue of the Master Planner saga.
So yeah, I think we go to the next issue, which is Amazing Spider-Man 32, Man on a Rampage.
Look out.
He's fucking throwing shit. This cover goes hard as fuck. Feel free to screenshot.
Yeah, it's really cool. I like the third one the best, I think, but this one's pretty strong.
Of course, the third one is iconic. It's easily the best one, but I really do think this is a sort of a more underrated one because it's just he's fucking throwing shit around.
Peter's fucking pissed.
He's pissed off.
The Master Planner is sitting in his underwater lair, just like off screen, kind of.
His super cool underwater sea base that he has. That's I guess under the Hudson River.
It's like a Capitol building, kind of. It looks very, I don't know, something like that, but it's got a big tunnel too.
Yeah, it's like under the Hudson River, the dirtiest river on planet Earth.
Absolutely. Well, it's full of radiation, I guess.
I guess.
And he's lamenting another scheme foiled by Spider-Man. He's close to a breakthrough in his mastery of lingering radiation, remarking how no one knows his secret identity. Dr. Octopus. Who would could have guessed?
I guess that either Stan or Steve, whoever had this idea of immediately revealing who the Master Planner is, I guess they just assumed that everyone had really low attention spans because they were like, let's not even keep this guy in suspense for more than one issue. We got to fucking deal with this.
Right, let's also not make him like someone new, just have him be somebody else we've already used before. But I guess thematically and character-wise, it could have been a worse choice.
Maybe Dr. Octopus was tired of being Dr. Octopus. Maybe he wanted to be somebody else.
He's rebranding, but he won't get rid of the tentacles.
He can't get rid of the tentacles. They're fused to his body.
Well, he could do something new with them, paint them. They're
he
not
could paint
tentacles,
them.
They're my worms. I'm Dr. Worm.
They call me Dr. Worm.
Yeah, it's not a lot of options, I guess, when you're at that stage. He feels that with radiation, he can give anyone, including himself, access to fantastic powers, which I guess isn't far off for this universe.
Yeah.
He orders his deputy squad leader to continue their search for any and all atomic equipment for him. I like how there's they get so specific with you're the deputy squad leader, but their goal is vaguely atomic equipment, whatever that means.
Just go steal any kind of radioactive shit. I need it.
Honey, I got the promotion to deputy squad leader in my purple goon armada.
Oh, that's very nice, honey. Dr. Octopus's plan is really funny because he acts essentially like that kid in a group science project who doesn't know what the fuck is going on. So he's like, give me radioactive shit. I don't know, equipment or something.
If you see this symbol, bring it back.
I need to give people powers and stuff.
Peter is meanwhile, aside from this, walking through the Bugle offices, rather sulking through the Bugle offices, where Betty Brant stops him hoping to chat. Peter doesn't want to talk due to everything, so he decides to act like an ass, like Lex mentioned, on purpose in front of her and Ned. Ned, of course, vying for Betty's hand in marriage.
Very, very strange logic that Peter's got going on. Instead of just breaking it off like a normal human being, he's like, "I'm gonna be an asshole."
He's gonna bully Maguire mode here. He's gonna put some dirt in some eyes. He's got
his hair cut differently. He's the first person to develop an emo haircut in 1965.
Yeah, maybe he's just out of Dapper Dan or whatever he puts in there.
Shoe polish.
He says that he's outgrown Betty, and Ned's good in this, I guess, for a guy trying to swoop in. He's like, Peter, let's talk, man. Let's this is Betty we're talking about. Let's talk. And Peter just shoves him into the wall.
Fuck you! He shoves him through the door into Jameson's office.
Yeah, okay, I guess I didn't catch that. I thought it was a thump being heard through the wall. No, that makes more sense. The JJ is like, what the fuck is going on? And he's like, Peter's not usually violent. What the fuck is happening? Peter, meanwhile, is like, yeah, nothing, whatever. Hey, do you want to buy pictures?
Just buy my pictures, asshole.
Doesn't give a fuck moment. He tries to sell him, and internally he's noting that he's always going to carry a torch for Betty, and that he knows he's no good for her, he can't have her, etc. And
as little as they kind of explore it in the Spectacular show, they kind of laugh it off as a joke, the Betty Peter relationship. There's specifically, I think, the second issue that the Vulture appears in. They have that's a really cute little good issue of them kindling their relationship for the first time. Betty Peter's kind of an underrated relationship, and they don't really do a whole lot with it because it's not the one everybody thinks of.
They don't touch on a lot, and when they do, it's something like Spectacular, where he's like a minor or something, and it's like, why are we doing this?
And here, because obviously it doesn't make a lot of sense, because why would somebody who would be Peter's age work as Jason Jameson's secretary?
Right.
But in the comics, she had to, because of her brother's gambling debts, she had to drop out of high school to become Jameson's secretary so she could pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
So they have at least a vague explanation for that. But yeah, Betty Peter, underrated pairing.
Yeah, I would say so. Not my favorite. I don't have a favorite.
No,
but
not my favorite.
Not among the favorites, but underrated. Jameson hates photos and doesn't want them and tells Peter to get the fuck out. It's why are you here?
I like to imagine they're all blurry photos of the inside of his pants pocket. It's like, what the fuck is this shit?
It's about more than flagpoles.
It's not about flagpoles. It's about lighting.
Betty knows this is an act from Peter. She can tell with her woman intuition that Stanley knows women have. And she tries to coax the truth out of him, but Peter still shrugs all this off and leaves the Bugle. heading back to the hospital, the other revolving set piece here that we see 3 or 4 times an issue, doctors are telling Peter that May has absorbed a radioactive particle into her blood.
I'm sorry, son. Your aunt has a bad case of particles in the blood.
No!
No, she's got blood particles, dude.
They lack the science or a tiny enough pair of tweezers to remove the particle from May.
It's
And
like a tweezer.
Peter believes all of this to be his fault because of a blood transfusion he had given May in a past adventure. Of course, all of this touched on in Back in Black One More Day, whenever that is. But
I believe it's Amazing Spider-Man 10.
yeah, that's early enough, I think. But yeah, oh god, it's my fault. I gave my aunt evil blood. Uh, he's completely morose now, heading home, feeling completely responsible for not only Ben's preventable death, but now May's impending preventable death. He gets so pissed off at himself and all of this and his self monologue that he just puts his fists through a really sturdy 60s table and a lamp and shit on it. Just completely splinters it. And
he's pissed. He's like, ah!
And he's like out loud angry, talking to himself about how he swears he can't pay May back this way with tragedy, and swears to save her no matter the cost. And once he kind of cools down just a hair, he decides he's going to contact Dr. Kurt Connors for some science help, like calling in a favor, so to speak.
On the phone.
Stealing May's blood sample from the window as Spider-Man. Spider-Man hightails it over to Kurt, hard at work doing science in the lab, like he does.
In the lab. And the first thing Peter swings into his window, and the first thing he says is, "Hi, Dr. Connors. Remember me?" Like,
how the fuck could I forget? That's the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me ever. Hello, can I help you?
Like he turned into a lizard man. He wasn't an amnesiac, dude. I think he remembers you.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were the other Spider-Man. Sorry.
No, I thought you were. I thought you were a arachnid guy. Ah, fuck. You know, there's so many of you guys out here. It's so confusing. I'm colorblind. I can't tell the difference between red and blue.
That's good. I thought you were Webman. I'm colorblind.
Damn.
Connors swears to do anything in his power he can do to help, out of respect and owing Spider-Man everything. He says he'll acquire a serum that's been developed on the West Coast called ISO-36 in the hopes of curing May, because it's like an it's like a Fallout anti-venom. It just fixes you. It's fine.
Yeah, that they keep in a soup thermos.
They do with a lunch pail. They keep it in. So to raise the funds to afford this ISO-36 shit, Peter decides to pawn all of his home science equipment in a very Peter moment. All of his microscopes and test tubes and dork shit, and even the pawn shop guy is like, "What? He's getting rid of his dork shit? No."
I didn't think you were a guy who had debts. You're selling all your science equipment. It reminds me of that deleted scene from Far From Home.
I was
where Peter sells
literally
his
about
toys.
to say the same thing. I was about to say
that really good deleted scene from Far From Home where he sells his action figures so he can buy the necklace for MJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish I had kept that in.
It's all about those little callbacks.
Peter has the money now to, with what he withdrew from the bank as well, to pitch in for some ISO-36 ordered by Dr. Connors, who has access to, Amazon.com/ISO-36. All of the stock available is being flown in specially for this.
From the West Coast.
Yeah, from the West Coast. That's pretty far from New York.
From the East Coast.
Peter helps Connors with some lab work prep too, mixing chemicals and warming beakers, and Connors is like, "Oh wow, you're good at science. Maybe you're not Spider-Man all the time."
Ah, shit.
Yeah, I guess you don't have to wear safety goggles if you're already wearing the mask.
That's true.
However, Master Planner goons are informed of the incoming shipment and inform the Master Planner about it. And Dr. Ock is fucking thrilled.
Did you call him Dr. Ock?
I think I might have.
Dr. Ock.
Dr. Ox, the things you fight in Zelda.
Yeah. I'm so
Yeah.
hungry, I can eat a Dr. Ox.
Oh my fucking god. I might have just done that. My mouth is pretty dry.
Get some
Doc
water,
Ock.
bro. You got to keep water on you at all times when you record the
I
podcast. That's rule
know,
number
I
one. That's what I
know.
do.
I'm evil. I'm gonna power through. I got this. I believe in myself, and with the power of Dr. Ock on my side.
Dr. Ock, get him on the horn.
He's thrilled about this shit. He needs ISO 36 to continue his research, and he says, "Go
I,
get that shit."
I like to imagine that they're on the video call with Dr. Ock, and they're like, "Hey, we heard some guys got ISO 36 coming in from the West Coast. You want us to do something about that?" He's just like, "Is it radioactive?" Yeah, I think so. Go get it. I need it.
It's like they're a dealer trying to push product. Hey man, I got some ISO 36. It's some medical shit, man. You gotta try this.
Dude, this isn't sativa. This is fucking ISO 36, dude. I'm smoking on that ISO 36 pack.
Peter, this wasn't weed. It was ISO
This isn't
36.
weed. This is ISO 36.
The purple goons clobber the delivery pilot and steal the load of the serum, which Peter hears about when Connors gets a phone call updating him.
They straight up steal his soup thermos that has the ISO 36 in it. And
It's
when Peter and Connors get the call that the ISO 36 has been stolen, Peter has like this dramatic turnaround where it's like, oh,
are you fucking kidding me? It's that like picture where it's like we threw the fucking package in a ravine.
we threw that shit in the river.
Yeah, it's his thermos of chicken noodle soup that he needs to cure Aunt May has been stolen.
Chicken noodle soup.
And Spider-Man divines that once he's fucked off and gone out the window, saying, "Oh, I'll be back with the."
I gotta go. Wee.
Spider-Man divines that the lair must be in the water, given that the most recent crime's vicinity to the waterfront. That can't be a coincidence. So Spider-Man swings into the Bugle, fully dressed as Spider-Man, into the Bugle to find Foswell. And Betty's like, "Oh, that guy he just left." And he's like, "Okay, bye, Betty." And she must be like fucking pissed. How dare you use my name, Spider-Man, you cad. On the street, Peter just fucking grabs Foswell, just scoops him the fuck up, and takes him off. And to a rooftop to remind us, the audience, of their history and say that he needs his underworld contacts to help him nab the master planner, and in return he'll credit him with a scoop, and hey, help me help you. Meanwhile, he busts every underworld haunt he can find in search of info. Just absolutely blasting through low-level meetings of street goons and restaurants and underpasses and shit. Where these guys meet.
Yeah, this is the artwork here specifically is really, really good. Where he's like jumping off, he's breaking wooden boxes and like jumping around and punching
Half-Life
dudes
crates.
in the face. It's really Half-Life crates. It's just really, he's fucking tearing shit up.
Absolutely. And what pisses him off is that absolutely none of these people know who or where the master planner is. They're not involved, and that's frightening.
Yeah, they're not the purple goons; they're regular goons.
Yeah, they're in suits and hats and hanging out, pinstripes.
Not purple frog suits.
At the hospital, May begins slipping into a coma. Not good usually. I don't do that. Spider-Man comes across a hot car ring, and like everybody else, these guys know fucking nothing.
This is where we get to see Peter's great new fighting style of just throwing shit. Like he grabs the whole staircase and throws it at a guy. He's like, where you know where the master planner is?
He's Grapple Man.
Exactly.
On his way away from this scene, in a blind alley, he finds a trap door that he enters, which leads him to a gang of the master planner's men. Which he
suddenly finds the secret entrance to the master planner's lair
pretty abruptly.
That looks like the set of like Double Dare. It's like all bright neon colors.
Yeah, with a lot of like machinery, just nondescript science equipment through a
Yeah,
lot of
dude,
this
it's
place.
machinery, dude. Don't even question it. He needs that for the machinery.
For his ray and his
For his
radiation
for his
experiment.
radiation, bro. He needs it.
Peter makes very quick work of these thugs, saying that he'll rip them all apart and this environment around him to get to that serum. Uh, and a goon tells Ock, meanwhile, that Spider-Man is on his way via the secret tunnel. It's not very
Secret
secret.
tunnel.
It like protrudes from the structure. It's not very secret.
No, not really.
Spider-Man comes across a suspiciously convenient canister of ISO 36, spotlit, knowing it's a trap. He's like clinging to a little like ring fixture in the room, which
Doc
then
Ock is like, okay, Spider-Man is coming. Do we still have that spotlight?
light it now.
Can we light it like the idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark? Can we just like get it like right like that?
Spidey strokes his chin and weighs his bag of sand.
Also, did you make sure to electrify the ceiling? We need that.
Specifically, the big metal wave circle thing he's coming in on, which, yeah, violently shocks Peter with a high voltage burst. And before he can even hit the floor, Doc Ock has snatched him out of the air, and now Peter knows who the master planner is.
I like that he's not even. It's not even like in Spectacular where he like tries to vaguely disguise himself as the master planner. Even on video calls, he's just Doctor Octopus.
It's me.
And he's like, I'm going through a rebrand right now. My name is the Master Planner.
It's a thing. It's a new drying. I couldn't grow a goatee. This is the next best thing.
It's one of my new characters, like Melvin, brother of the Joker.
Oh my good god, I can't believe you brought up Melvin, brother of the
Melvin,
Joker.
Melvin, brother of the Joker.
Flippity sploosh. Peter hits the floor and tries to swing Ock around by the tentacles. They brawl for a while. He ties his arms up. And after a long, bout of just rage-fueled Peter, normally he'd be pretty pissed, but this is his aunt's soup that has been stolen. So he's
He needs that soup.
very upset. And eventually, Dr. Octopus realizes he knows he can't beat the Raging Spider-Man, and that the only conclusion to get out of here is escape to live.
Yeah, ISO stands for I, comma soup.
It's intravenous soup 36.
I soup 36.
Uh,
That means there's 36 different unique flavors within the broth.
It's like Dr. Pepper. It's the Dr. Pepper of soups.
It's hot Dr. Pepper.
They just developed this on the West Coast, Peter. It's hot Dr. Pepper. A little carbonation, Peter, and I'll see you later.
If you used to get glass made of glass.
Oh my god.
Make sure you only use little spills. You don't want to break the glass.
During the fight, Spider-Man damages the main support beam of cast iron, I think they specify, and the upper levels of the lair begin to collapse. The structural integrity is starting to give way under all the water pressure. And as shit starts to collapse, Peter is kind of pinned from the waist down and can't pinpoint location. Totally loses the Ock for the rest of the comic, right? Like, I think we get some like maybe voice stuff at the end.
Yeah, no, he doesn't show up at all in the next issue.
He's just fucked off.
Peter's able to narrowly like maneuver himself so that he's in a little gap, so he's at least able to like live when the giant piece of metal crushes him.
He's pinned first, and then that giant fucking thing starts to come down, and he has to like web it and like Tetris himself into this alcove. Yeah,
exactly.
It's he didn't get hurt. His leg is hurt, but he's not like squished to death.
He's not dead, so there's that.
Yeah, very good position to be in. Right in front of him is the vial of serum, and he's like, well, it doesn't even matter if I can reach it because fucking I'm pinned here. This is not good. Even with my spider strength, this is just absolute dog shit. I can't get out of this. Big droplets begin to pelt him in the ISO, and Spider-Man realizes that the water is going to surge through the widening cracks in the ceiling soon, and he will die. He struggles and shifts, but he cannot move the shit that's pinning him down, not even an inch. And with his recent exhaustion combined with everything he's going through, it's just too thorough. He's too thoroughly like empty and cleaned out. Uh, Briefly back at the hospital, May whispers Peter's name and a little Star Wars moment, I guess.
So old.
And Connors watches the clock as Peter slowly begins to run out of time before the serum is useless.
And then right at the very end, there's a little text box from Stan. He's like, "You must not miss the next issue of Spider-Man." It's like, I won't, Stan. I won't.
I promise. It's one click away from me because it's 2021. But if this was 1965, you can bet my little white ass would have been at the comic stand with 75 cents in hand or whatever.
With my propeller cap and my lederhosen and my lollipop.
I absolutely would have. But yeah, right before the end of the issue, the Master Planner's goons are waiting outside the room to jump Peter, also totally unaware that the ceiling in there is about to give.
These are not looking good.
Spider-Man is lamenting his final and ultimate failure as the second issue closes out here.
God.
Can't miss the next one.
Don't miss it.
And here we are. Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh my God, we didn't miss it. Thank God.
Thank Christ. Did you have the title on this one too? I don't recall.
It's time for issue 33, the final chapter.
Oh yeah, that is it.
Which, great fucking cover. Sensational.
It's Peter Lives. Spidey has nearly resigned himself to his fate, before remarking, again, how he can't let May die and how he's forsaken her and Ben. We get a lot of, tiny little baby recap there.
This whole sequence has, this timeless, not a whole lot to be said about the sequence that hasn't already been said. There's all this great art, there's amazing monologue. It's just really, really tremendous stuff here. It's
predominantly monologue. It's for an issue that takes place mostly in one location with a character being pinned down. It's very, very good.
It's like 6 pages, and it's almost all just monologue.
Mm-hmm. Specifically, I have written down that, he has within his body the strength of many men, and now all he has to do is call on that strength. A lot of self-pep talk type stuff, and he begins pushing down really hard.
I love this. I love this scene because it's, leave it to Pete to give himself an audible pep talk while he's trying to lift this shit off of him. And specifically, there's just one line right at the end, right before he lifts the thing off of him finally, while he's got the water pouring down on him, where he says, "Anyone can win a fight when the odds are easy. It's when the going's tough, when there seems to be no chance. That's when it counts." I'm like, yeah! I'm like I'm like standing up cheering like that one guy and like all those people who watched Avengers Endgame and like came in their pants. I'm like that guy. This is a good ass comic.
And all the ceiling is just getting bigger and bigger, and the water is getting worse and worse. And yeah, eventually, and in this incredible iconic moment that, again, what can we say that hasn't already been said? He shoves this debris like up over him, first crouching, and then like at the most unendurable moment, it's gone. He like fucking flings the shit, and he's freed.
Yeah, they have as sort of he puts more and more effort into getting out of it. The panels sort of get bigger and bigger until there's this final big full on splash page where he's lifting it off and he's like, "I did that, I'm free." And it's like this fucking comic rocks.
Immediate declaration of freedom. He realizes that his leg is hurt, but he calls it a win. Collects the serum, his way towards the exit very quickly, trying to get away. But unfortunately, that collapses, and the water surges towards which he uses the momentum of it to let it carry him around for just a bit to get minuscule moments of rest in, as it sweeps him down the tunnel. Going under the water, he searches for a way out among the debris and metal, knowing that the water surge is probably going to do a lot of good to get the door down, and breaches the surface to another room. However, waiting for him are diver goons who are tugging on him. So he rips out their air hoses and forces them to surface. And now that everybody's on the surface, they expect a fight, and we're in front of the only exit, motherfucker. You got to get through us, you tired asshole.
it's like 15 purple goons, and they like surround him and just start beating the fuck out of him.
And these goons are chatty, by the way. They fucking taunt him and shit. They don't make it easy on him.
Yeah, and at the same time, he's also trying to recover his energy, and he gives himself another audible pep talk while
uh
he's getting the shit kicked out of him, and he's like swinging wildly, and he just kicks the shit out of all of them, and it's another great scene.
Right. Well, at first they get the best of him.
Yeah,
He's using like their time beating him as downtime. Like, okay,
yeah,
let me take a second to just get my shit rocked.
like he's strong enough. He says that he's strong enough that their blows don't really he doesn't really feel them, but he's using that time to like recover his energy before he could flip the switch and start beating the fuck out of him.
And when he does get a second win with the crippled leg, he's so enraged and so swearing against failure that he's done. When he's done, he's still ready to beat, and they're all unconscious on the ground, and he's like, oh fuck, all right,
Yeah,
damn.
it's awesome.
Peter makes his grand escape from the lair. Dr. Connors, soup in hand, and tells Connors, I'll tell you everything later, just take this now.
Go.
uh Spider-Man decides he's his own blood for like a control, I guess, a comparison in secret against May's blood. So he does
Yeah.
that on the side and doesn't tell Dr. Connors. Well, he runs it by him, but he doesn't explain that it's his blood, I should say.
He's like, I gotta test this blood sample, and he's like, what? How do you know this is like? Is like, shut up! I don't. Let me do this.
Now that they know the cure works, knows that he needs to warn Peter that the demographic, like the age and the sex and everything of the patient could affect, there's variables here. But Peter says, that's great, whatever. Call the hospital and tell them that it's on the way.
Call the hospital because you're a man of renown and they will respect you.
Hi, I'm
and then
Dr.
they'll let
Connors.
they'll let me, a guy in a mask, just show up and give them this medicine.
Hi, I'm disgraced Dr. Kirk Connors. My friend Spider,
Hey,
yes, the guy that the newspapers hate.
He's not disgraced. He's not a disgraced scientist because nobody knows he was the lizard.
Oh, true. That's true. Yeah. Sorry, I guess I've got like Spectacular on the brain.
He kept it a secret.
Oh yeah. Spidey arrives to the hospital, breathless, handing over to get ready to save Aunt May's life is going to take about 2 hours. Peter returns to the scene now that he has this like 2-hour window of downtime before May's life is saved to get some photo time in, photo staging. He gets some, manipulated on his end shots of Spider-Man leaving the facility out of the trap door, and the supposed Peter goes down into the trapdoor and takes pictures of all the knocked out goons. So yeah, he gets some good photos in, and Foswell gets a phone call regarding the Spidey scoop. Held in onto that end of the bargain there. And Jameson is ecstatic, waiting for money to roll in regarding this entire fiasco. A lot of big grinning Jameson in this issue.
And Betty says, "Mr. Jameson, you're smiling. Is anything wrong?"
Yeah, then they call him a Scrooge later, say that Scrooge is more generous than him. It's good JJ shit this issue. Great JJ shit.
JJ is at the fucking top of his game here in this whole arc. It's really good.
Spidey gives Foswell all of the info he has regarding the master planner and leaves, taking all of the pics that he can a few rooftops away from the ensuing police scene. Peter then hurries back to the Bugle to make the sale, where a downright jubilant J. Jonah Jameson is telling Foswell on the phone that the only thing missing is pictures. Before the transaction can occur, Betty intercepts Peter and notes his busted up face, which he blames on getting pictures for JJ, which causes Betty to have like a mind-breaking like brother moment, like, oh god, I can't lose you to living dangerously too, Peter. And
Peter's like
tears.
Peter's like, I like to live dangerously, and Betty's like, oh, I can't be with a man who wants to live such a dangerous life.
She's rushing off crying over Peter's need for action, and Peter wonders, how bad it would be, like, worse than this if she knew the real truth, the full truth. And he, one final, I know I'm no good for Betty. When Peter shows up with the exact photos that JJ is desiring, Peter just is straight up, okay, I want $100 a shot, non-negotiable.
Fuck you.
Internally, Jameson knows they're worth easily double that and still tries to boo-hoo him about the money. But Peter's like, nope, write me a check right now. And Jameson's like, God damn, is Peter bold these days to himself. You know, good stuff all around there.
Yeah, he's standing up for himself. You'd love to see it.
Back at the hospital, Peter is ready to hear the test results, but gets an insistent checkup from a very persistent doctor first, who says, "Yeah, you're on the brink of exhaustion, my guy. You need to fucking sleep."
Yeah, because he looks all beat the fuck up.
And Peter's like, "Thank God he didn't ask for a blood test."
Oh, otherwise I would have found particles.
Dude, you are full of these fucking things.
Dude, there's so many particles. You're like 98% particle.
Have you been to Nagasaki recently, Peter? Are you okay?
Are you hanging out in nuclear reactors or some shit?
May's results are favorable as the serum worked for her. She kind of stirs from her coma a little bit and says Peter's name a few times, but passes back to sleep. And the remarkable fortune of Spider-Man's intervention in the matter, even though they have no idea what his motive was, and that's a real head-scratcher for them. Peter says he's not as bad as people think he is, that Spider-Man guy. And the doctor's like, okay, go home and rest now. And as we get our final little shots of Peter, stumbling and slinking down the sidewalk as the blinds go down, the narration of the doctors are talking about, wow, we wish more kids looked up to devoted and well-mannered and sincere people like Peter Parker, and not that thrill-seeker Spider-Man.
Yeah. The doctor
Closing
says that
out
Peter Parker. Yeah, the doctor says that Peter Parker sure is a nice boy, and I'm like, he sure is. You got that right.
You fucking got that right. And that closes out the Master Planner Saga, which is also the last comic we're talking about this season.
There you go. Well, I mean, it's like the second to last episode. Before that, we got to. Yeah, there's not a whole lot left to talk about.
Yeah.
We thought it would be good to just before we get to the most recent piece of Spider-Man media, we start way back at near the beginning. Be fun.
Absolutely.
All right, Alex, do you have any fun facts about these comic books?
I sure do. Before we get into the facts about the comic in general, I wanted to talk about briefly the Lee Ditko thing, like you talked about at the beginning of this.
Yes.
However, I want to mix things up a little bit here. Sorry if this is unprompted, but you're between the two of us a little bit more of the Marvel historian, and I feel like whatever you know about it on hand is better than this little snippet of text I have about it here. That's not very super in depth. I would love to hear your take on the situation.
I mean, generally, this in these later issues, I don't remember exactly what the sort of cutoff point is, but
it's close to this period.
Close to this period, around this time, this is when Stan and Steve's relationship is really becoming more strained. This is obviously during the time when the Marvel method was how they operated, which is why Steve is credited as both the plotter and the artist. Because Steve had a lot of creative freedom where he basically plotted out the entire issue. He had a general idea of what he wanted to do for these 3 issues, and then just gave them to Stan so he could edit them and then write all the dialogue. So there's a lot of different factors that led up to them having disagreements. Part of it is Stan's sort of not exactly being the one to be like, I and only I created Spider-Man, because Stan wasn't really like that. He was more, he didn't really correct people when people said that. He was more of the public facing guy and was more willing to accept the guy as the sole creator of Spider-Man, even though he always said that it was a co-creation, that Stan and Steve created him together. But he wasn't quick to correct him when somebody said that he created Spider-Man. So Steve obviously was not feeling appreciated because he had a lot to work on, and Stan had a lot to work on too, because Stan was writing this comic and also 80 different other comics at the time. He was doing Avengers and Thor and all these other. He was writing basically every comic that Marvel had. All the major ones, Fantastic Four, all this other shit. He was a very busy guy. They were both very busy. Also, there was the idea that I don't remember what his name was. The guy who owned Marvel at the time, the editor in chief, before Stan stepped up, who basically was just fucking everybody over, like wasn't paying them. There were a lot of different factors that led up to that sort of the chafing of their relationship. Eventually, by I think issue 38, like I said earlier, Steve left the comic. John Romita Sr. stepped up. He started doing the artwork for the comic. And Steve left to go do stuff for DC, and then later on, go do a weird objectivist, a libertarian comic book called Mr. A, which is a complete freak show. If you want to read that, that's part of the inspiration for Rorschach and Watchmen. And then he became a curmudgeonly shut-in in New York, and then he died.
Dude's
and meanwhile, Stan wrote a bunch of other comics and then tried to shepherd Marvel's outside media presence, as we talked about back in the Toei Spider-Man episode, where he had a hand in trying to get that made, and also in the 77 movie episode. And then, Stan ended up becoming a corporate cheerleader, and then he died, and now his estate is shilling NFTs on Twitter. So,
God, I only saw that today, man. Oh my God.
So, this will happen to everything that you love. Nothing you enjoy will be free from the taint of capital. And yeah.
Kevin's asked about, like, how's it feel to see everything you ever loved go down in flames?
I feel great. But yeah, generally that was the situation. It was a lot of Stan and Steve were both very complicated guys. There's no real, people like to go and be like, nowadays, things have turned around where people are like, Stan Lee never did anything. He's an asshole. He never created Spider-Man. That was all Steve Ditko. It was a mutual thing.
Exactly.
Stan couldn't have made Spider-Man without Steve, and Steve couldn't have made Spider-Man without Stan.
People take it very seriously one way or the other, whether they're right or not. They get very heated over their take on it.
In this specific situation, it's a sort of enlightened centrism that you have to go with.
Exactly.
They couldn't have done it without each other. Like, Steve did all the plot and did all this amazing artwork, but all of the great dialogue that wouldn't have been there without Stan.
Right.
It wouldn't have been, none of this would exist and would be the Spider-Man that we know and like without either of these guys. And, it was a shame that their relationship, deteriorated and they never really patched it up before they passed. But, that's just the way things are sometimes. And we just have to live with the body of work they've given us.
Mm-hmm.
It's very trying to decipher the story of 60s Marvel and why things ended up falling apart. And, there's also the whole thing there's an even more complicated story with Stan and Jack Kirby. Which is an entirely different thing because Jack Kirby's, I want to say, a much more forceful personality than Steve Ditko was. Steve Ditko was very much kind of a nebbish, quiet guy. But Jack Kirby was Jack Kirby, a big strapping Jewish man who killed a bunch of Nazis in the war.
And he drew some goddamn felt posters in his life. I swear to God.
His head was in the shape of a square, and he wasn't going to take shit from anybody. So obviously, it was a very different setup with what happened with Jack. But it's a whole lot of things. I know there's a lot of books that have been written about this. There's one on the tip of my tongue that I can't remember exactly. I'll try to put it in the description of the episode. A book about early Marvel. But there's lots of different resources you can read up on. A lot of this I'm getting from Screw It, we're just going to talk about comics, their first season where they talk about the Lee Ditko run. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Absolutely. And again, I do appreciate it.
No problem.
Like we've already discussed here and there throughout the podcast, there are, future references in the comic to the blood work that transpired earlier in the series and here, and their effects on May and the ideas behind, should we give her more blood? Let's not do that again. Triple first appearance, like we mentioned, of Gwen Stacy, Harry Osborn, Miles Warren. With that said, also Peter's first day at ESU, and with all of that said, the real trivia here is that this is May's third serious health condition in just 31 issues. Uh, this comic it had been around less than collectively like not even 3 dozen issues, and May has already been like on death's door 3 times, which only makes like the ideas behind One More Day and everything about that like come the fuck on, let it go. She was ready to die
It's
50 years ago.
of all the things that I enjoy about the Lead Ditko run, Aunt May is like I don't really like Aunt May in the Lead Ditko run
She's
because
got balsa wood bones and brown paper skin. She's like
because I've always talked about how I like when Aunt May takes a more active and participatory role in stories. I hope they do something with that in No Way Home, but I have no way of knowing until after this episode already comes out when I've seen it.
in about a
Uh,
week.
in about a week ago.
Yeah, it's been.
But May how May is in these comics is she only exists to be another thing for Peter to worry about. She doesn't have any character traits of her own other than just being old and frail. And it's like
She's a living
it's very
monument to the Uncle Ben mistake, is what she is.
it's a very two-dimensional way to write a character, and obviously there's the focus should be on Spider-Man. But I wish they could have done a more focused job. But again, these are the early days,
Super early.
so I can't really fault them for that, not wanting to focus on some random side character and instead focus on fleshing out their main protagonist.
Mm-hmm. Another brief thing we already talked about is the multiple adaptations of this comic throughout various medium. There's 2 we talked about and one we didn't. One I'm not sure that you are even aware existed because it's from a cartoon that is shit that neither of us have watched. Dr. Octopus uses the Master Planner alias in the episodes Reinforcement and Sheer Strength of the Spectacular Spider-Man, which you can hear us talk a lot about over the course of a month earlier this season.
And I think, if I remember correctly, I at least was kind of underwhelmed by the way they did the Master Planner saga in Spectacular.
I was too.
That's one of the few sour notes I have about that show is that I wish they could have done this storyline better.
Yeah, it just didn't live up, I think, to what it was trying to be. Like, because they kind of do a little like reversal of it, kind of where Spider-Man's trapped under debris, and it's not the mental like thing, the thread that guides him through this, that monologue that guides him. It's, oh yeah, Gwen's here. I need to. Oh shit, yep. I was just gonna die, but you know what? I need to save Gwen. I'm gonna do this, and it's just not very weighty. It's very light.
They do it. They do it way better in Homecoming. Homecoming is easily the best adaptation of this.
Absolutely, the very next thing I was going to mention.
Even if it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the original story, they just take the ending part of 33.
Yeah, slightly different in Homecoming, like we're saying here too. Mostly just the pinned under rubble stuff. Less no master planner, no underwater layer. Just the debris pinning, gathering enough strength to escape. But that really, I just watched Homecoming the other day. Really, really lovely. That mask in the water scene. I know it's
half
on the
mask.
nose.
Oh my god, I'm gonna fucking come just thinking about it. I love that scene so
And
much. Just like Homecoming itself, they make a lot of changes, but they keep that core of the character so that core little pearl of the character so perfect that I don't really see where people are like Tony Stark's in the movie too much. It's like
it's almost as if the movie's about eclipsing your mentor expectations.
You can say that, but then you have to disregard the entire fact that sequence right at the end, that and him walking away from the girl of his dreams at prom to go stop this random supervillain because it's the right thing to do. That is what is so important to the character, and that overrides every other minor little quibble you have about the movie.
And I'll also say 4 years later, that's those like the screams and cries he lets out when he's pinned, it's still fucking jarring 4 years later. That kid acted his ass off in that movie.
It's so good. Tom Holland is so good, and the way that he's which is just turned into us gushing about how good Homecoming is. When I still fucking think about him lifting that shit off, and he's like, "Come on, Peter, come on, Spider-Man." I'm like, "Yeah."
We will not tolerate Tom Holland slander.
It's so good.
And finally, an adaptation of the lifting scene appears in the episode The Hobgoblin Part 2 of the 2017 Spider-Man animated series. The
I forgot that
Hobgoblin
existed.
the Hobgoblin destroys the suspended passage's supports, and Spider-Man attempts to lift it and rescue civilians trapped in a bus underneath, ultimately gathering the willpower to do so thanks to a memory of Uncle Ben telling a young Peter that, quote, "the only time you lose is when you stop trying." So, there's
I
that.
haven't seen that show. I've heard that it's not great, but sounds
That
good on paper.
the moment sounds good on paper, yeah. The animation style is a little bland to me, I think, compared to a lot of the other
It
beautiful
is a
Spider-Man animation projects that exist.
it is a modern Disney Channel animated show, so it obviously
Mhm.
doesn't look very good.
Overall, in terms of like the legacy this comic has left, comics historian Les Daniels noted that, quote, "Steve Ditko squeezes every ounce of anguish out of Spider-Man's predicament, complete with the visions of the uncle that he failed and the aunt that he's sworn to save." Writer Peter David observed that after his origin, this two-page sequence from The Amazing Spider-Man 33 is perhaps the best loved sequence from the Lee Ditko era. Steve Saffel stated that the full-page Ditko image in The Amazing Spider-Man number 33 is the most powerful to ever appear in the series, and has
It's
influenced
really good.
writers and artists for years to come. And lastly, Matthew K. Manning wrote that Ditko's illustrations for the first few pages of this Lee story included what would become probably the most iconic scene in Spider-Man's history.
It's
Uh,
really really good.
the story
And
was chosen. Oh, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
generally in the modern era, I would say the most iconic Spider-Man scene I think would generally be overridden by the train scene in Spider-Man 2. Uh,
Probably.
but something about it, I have a lot of criticisms with the Raimi trilogy that we've talked about before. But the, something I really wish that he would have tried to do something like that, like do some kind of adaptation of this, because
Oh
if
yeah.
anybody's going to do melodramatic shit like this, it would be Sam Raimi. He would be able
You
to
can
pull it
hear
off
that
really well, I
that
think.
that Elfman score swell when it comes
Oh
up
my
over his
god,
head.
dude! I swear to God, again, this episode will come out. By the time this episode is out, we will both have already seen the movie. But if they have the fucking Danny Elfman Spider-Man score in No Way Home, I'm gonna fucking blow my load in the theater. It's gonna
I
happen.
I will let out an audible groan. I will
I'm gonna be
pog
like,
hard.
oh, it's gonna happen. Like cry. It's gonna happen.
I will be a grown child in that theater 2
It's
decades
gonna
later.
happen.
This is my Force Awakens moment. No one can take it from me.
Only this time it'll
Uh,
be a good movie.
oh God, please.
Just kidding. I
I,
like The Force Awakens.
I think it's fine. I'm a Last
It's all
Jedi
right.
member more than anything.
I like The Force Awakens. I'm more of a Last Jedi guy, but
Absolutely. This is a pro
let's
Last Jedi podcast, as we've said.
let's try to hope that this isn't like a Rise of Skywalker situation.
Oh no,
Let's
not
hope we
possible.
avoid that.
Not possible. Lastly, this story was chosen as number 15 in the 100 Greatest Marvel Comics of All Time poll in 2001. And editor Robert Greenberger wrote in his introduction that the story, these first 5 pages are a modern day equivalent to Shakespeare, as Parker's soliloquy sets the stage for every next action. And with dramatic pacing and storytelling, Ditko delivers one of the great sequences in all comics.
I would agree with
Which,
this. This is a valid statement.
hands down. That was predominantly more legacy talk than trivia. We got a lot of the trivia out of the way as things happen, but that's what I got for Master Planner Saga.
Yeah. Uh yeah. Alex, what are your overall thoughts on the Master Planner Saga?
I do get the hype. It is a very short and sweet thing. It clocks in at like 63 pages maybe with covers. It's not some great big grand investment of time. It's not gonna like set the tone for your entire afternoon like something like Blue or Craven's Last Hunt would.
Yeah.
Um, but with that said, it I think it highlights the things that make Peter work as Peter. And I think it shines a light on the things that make Spider-Man work as Spider-Man, and that big Venn diagram overlap is what is really on display here.
I would agree.
The character is, I know we say the characterization a lot, but this is early enough, being the earliest thing we've talked about so far, that this is where the stage is still being set for like what Spider-Man is and who Spider-Man is. And it comes out hard here. It's as iconic as everybody says, and you just can't buy better motivation than this. It really stands in stark contrast to what it's referenced in later in, Back in Black and One More Day. It just stands out so completely as a story rooted in what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man and the choices that go behind that and the logic that fuels those choices. And I highly recommend it, especially if you're into older Spider-Man comics. If you are, you've probably already read this, but I highly, highly, highly recommend the Master Planner Saga.
Yeah, you put it really well. This is a really really good story. I almost want to say that it's the best Stan and Steve story. I don't know, the origin is really really good, especially for just being one comic.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a perfect story. But this is, like you said, it's everything, and I talked about it. It's everything this character should be. And I talked about it I think honestly back on the intro of the first season, that it's kind of amazing how fully formed Spider-Man came out of this. Because, you talk about the really early Batman comics or the really early Superman comics, and, it isn't until like the 80s or Daredevil, and there's all these characters that like, it takes a long time for them to become fully formed in the way that they are. You have like,
Yeah.
Batman doesn't really fully establish who Batman is uh, for a while, and Daredevil, obviously, the easiest one to have as an example is Daredevil doesn't really become Daredevil until we get to the Frank Miller stuff, and but with this, it's like immediately first issue, every Peter Parker is a fully formed character, and everything else is just riffing off of that. And there's been changes, but it's essentially it's kind of amazing how well that it's next year will be the 60-year anniversary of this character. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing how long he's stuck around in essentially the same form that he has been for 60 years. It's not like Batman, where there was the campy era, and then there was the dark brooding era, and then there's the more fun adventure era, and there's all these sorts of different things. But Spider-Man is like one continuous lineage that you can trace all the way back to here, and this is just an incredible example of what Stan and Steve were able to do working together, and how they were able to put something as great as this together in 3 issues for kids in the 60s. It's required reading. You should read this comic.
I think you put that really well. I can tell you care about this comic a lot.
It's really good. If you want to read them, there's so many options. It's online. I actually have the Spider-Man Epic collections. This issue, these 3 issues specifically, are in Volume 2, Great Responsibility, but also go pick up Volume 1, Great Power. And if you want to complete the look, you can also pick up the 3rd volume, Spider-Man No More, which also covers the early Romita era. So all in all, those 3 volumes are about the first 50-ish issues of Spider-Man. I think it ends around the time Mary Jane is introduced. But that's just one really great way to read all these. You read them online, obviously, free. Read these comics however you can. They're really, really great.
I cannot agree more.
All right. That is our show. Thank you so much for listening. If you've got a question or a comment that you want us to read on next week's episode, which is our last episode of the season, so if you've got something you really, really want to say, get it in there. Send it to us at our email address, spideysignalspodcast@gmail.com. Shoot us a DM on our Twitter at spideysignals. Again, last chance. We don't, unlike the end of last season, we don't really have any plans for a season 3. We're facing open waters here.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know when we'll be back. But get your questions in now if you have any. Because next week we're gonna cover Spider-Man No Way Home.
Oh boy.
So until then, oh boy, yeah. So until then, stay responsible. Bye.
I'll take you out for a Coke after class.
Milk sop.